Hello students and welcome back to the online lecture series of Pharmacognosy and Phytochemistry 2 of 5th semester. I am Nilesh Banarse and today we are going to discuss about amino acid pathways and study of utilization of radioactive isotopes in the investigation of biogenetic studies. But before heading to the today's topic, let's take a short revision of previous study. In the last lecture, we had discussed about acetate pathways. The important building block for the acetate pathways are active acetates, that is acetyl coenzyme A. The two most important pathways in which acetyl coenzyme A plays an important role are acetate mevalonate pathway and acetate malonate pathway. Acetate mevalonate pathway is also called as isoprenoid pathway or HMG coenzyme A reductase pathway. This pathway begins with acetyl coenzyme A and ends with the production of isopentenyl 5-pyrophosphate, that is IPP, and dimethyl allyl pyrophosphate, that is DMAPP. These IPP and DMAPP acts as active isoprene units and resulted to form various terpenes like camphor, taxanes, and sterols like stigmasterols, polyisoprene compounds like rubbers, and hormones like gibberellins. In acetate malonate pathway, acyl carrier protein plays a vital role. Acetate malonate pathway is useful for the biosynthesis of fatty acids in plants, along with some flavonoids and anthraquinone glycosides. The resulted fatty acids can undergo metabolism to produce other components like methyl jasmonate as secondary metabolites. So, up to this we had discussed in last lecture. For more information, you can visit this channel. Moving further, today we are going to discuss about amino acid pathways and study of utilization of radioactive isotopes in the investigation of biogenetic studies. So, in order to study the amino acid pathway, let's study some basic details. Firstly, we should know what are the amino acids, what are its importance in humans as well as in plants. Amino acids are the organic compounds that contains amine, that is NH2, and carboxyl, that is COOH functional group, along with side chain, that is R group, specific to each amino acid. R group determines the identity of amino acid. For example, if R group is hydrogen atom, then the amino acid is glycine, while if it is methyl group, the amino acid becomes alanine. There are about 500 amino acids discovered in nature till date, but only 20 of them can be the part of proteins and are called as standard amino acids or proteinogenic amino acids. There are two more amino acids are found which are proteinogenic in nature but are categorized as non-standard amino acids. These are selenocysteine and pyrrolysine. These two amino acids are not encoded by universal genetic code but by unique synthetic mechanism. Humans can synthesize 10 out of these 20 amino acids and are called as non-essential amino acids, while The remaining were supplied through diet and cannot synthesize by body, which are termed as essential amino acids. Non-essential amino acids includes alanine, asparagine, aspartic acid, cysteine, glutamic acid, glutamine, glycine, proline, serine, and tyrosine, while essential amino acids are histidine, leucine, isoleucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, valine, and arginine. Arginine is required to the young but not for the adult person. Tyrosine is produced from phenylalanine. So, if the diet is deficient in phenylalanine, tyrosine will be required as well. For humans, amino acids act as building blocks for protein synthesis. They are involved in almost every function of body, including growth and development, healing and repair, normal digestion, providing energy to body, and synthesis of various hormones and neurotransmitters. During protein synthesis, the carboxyl group of the amino acid at the end of grooving polypeptide chain reacts with the amino group of incoming amino acid to form the bond called as peptide bond with release of water molecule. On the other hand, plants can synthesize all 20 amino acids. Amino acids are useful to plants in various ways like glycine and glutamic acids are the fundamental metabolites in the process of formation of vegetable tissues and chlorophyll synthesis. These amino acids helps to increase chlorophyll concentration in plants, leading to higher degree of photosynthesis. It is also acts as building blocks for protein synthesis in plants. Amino acids are related to the preventing and recovering effects from stress. Amino acid regulates opening of stomatas, where L-glutamic acid acts as cytoplasmic osmotic agents of the guard cells. Amino acids, especially L-glycine and L-glutamic acids, are acts as chelating agent, which helps in easy absorption and transportation of micronutrients. Amino acids are precursors and activators of phytohormones and growth regulators. For example, L-methionine is a precursor of ethylene and growth factors such as spermine and spermidine, which are synthesized from 5-adenosyl-methionine. Similarly, L-tryptophan is useful for oxygen synthesis. L-asparagine induces synthesis of flowers and fruits related hormones. L-proline helps in fertility of pollens. L-lysine, methionine, and glutamic acid are essential for pollination, which increases pollen germination rate and length of pollen tubes. L-methionine acts as a precursor growth factor that stabilizes the cell walls of microbial flora. Because of this microbial flora, the proper mineralization of soil and soil fertility is maintained, which is useful for growth of plants. L-proline and hydroxyproline strengthens the cellular walls and gives protection from unfavorable conditions. L-alanine, L-valine, and L-leucine improves quality of fruits. Also, L-histidine helps in proper ripening of fruits. So, this is all about the general information about amino acids. Now, let's move toward the topic that how amino acid can be synthesized in plants and what are the secondary metabolites that can be resulted from these amino acids. We already studied the shikimic acid pathway in which erythrose 4-phosphate or pentose phosphate pathway along with phosphoenol pyruvate of glycolysis resulted to form phenylalanine, tyrosine and tryptophan. Ribose 5-phosphate of pentose phosphate pathway resulted to form histidine. Histidine further in association with 3-phosphoglycerate of glycolysis resulted into serine. 3-phosphoglycerate further converted to phosphoenol pyruvate resulted to form alanine, valine, leucine and isoleucine, while alpha-ketoglutarate of citric acid cycle resulted to form glutamate, glutamine, proline and arginine. Oxaloacetate resulted to form aspartate, aspargine, methionine, threonine and lysine. In plants, cysteine is synthesized via two-step pathway from its precursor L-serine through O-acetylserine as an intermediate. In plants, glycine can be biosynthesized by at least 3 routes, one from L-serine, second from L-threonine and third through glyoxylate cycle. This is about the biosynthesis of 20 amino acids in plants. Now, let's study about the secondary metabolites that can be resulted from these amino acids. In fact, a very little work have been published regarding biosynthesis of secondary metabolites from amino acids. As already discussed, phenylalanine and tyrosine are resulted to form C6C3 phenylpropane units like cinnamic acid, coumarins, lignans and flavonoids, and along with tryptophan as a precursor of wide range of alkaloids. L-lysine acts as a precursor of some piperidine type alkaloids as well as some bitter principles like lupine, anabasine and pyrethyrine. L-glutamate converted to L-ornithine in plants forms the pyrrolidine ring structure, which is the basic skeleton for various alkaloids like nicotine, nornicotine and other constituents of plants belonging to Solanaceae family. L-ornithine, a non-proteinous amino acid, also involved in biosynthesis of tropine alkaloids like atropine. Glutamine, glutamate, aspargine and aspartate are utilized to biosynthesize all nitrogenous compounds. So, students, this is all about amino acid pathways. Now, let's move toward our next topic, that is study of utilization of radioactive isotopes in the investigation of biogenetic studies. So here the curiosity arises that what is meant by biogenesis? Biogenesis is the process of synthesis of substances by living organisms. So, in this section, we will study that how the plants can biosynthesize its chemical constituents and how the radioactive isotopes can be used to trace such biosynthesis in plants. Before touching this topic, let's take a short study on what is atomic number and what is atomic mass number, what are the isotopes and what are its type, what is radioactive decay and half-life. We know that atom consists of neutrons and protons in the nucleus and electrons revolving around it. Number of protons within the atom's nucleus is called atomic number and is equal to the number of electrons, while sum of number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus of atom is called atomic mass number. Element can exist in different forms with similar atomic number but different mass number, and such forms of that element are termed as isotopes. So, it means that all isotopes of a given element have same number of protons but different number of neutrons in each atom. For example, element carbon is mainly existed in three isotopes, that is C12, C13 and C14 with mass number 12, 13 and 14 respectively. The atomic number of carbon is 6, which means that every carbon atom has 6 protons. So, the number of neutrons in C12, C13 and C14 isotopes are 6, 7 and 8 respectively. Every element can have more than one isotope. Now, these isotopes are categorized into two types, that are radioactive isotopes and stable isotopes. Radioactive isotopes are those which undergoes a breakdown or decay with emission of radiation to transform into more stable form, while some don't show radioactive decay and are called as stable isotopes. For example, C14 is a radioactive isotope, while C12 and C13 are isotopes of carbon, are stable isotopes of carbon. Now, let us discuss about radioactive decay. Radioactive decay is the spontaneous breakdown of an atomic nucleus resulting in the release of energy and matter from the nucleus. Remember that a radioisotope has unstable nuclei that does not have enough binding energy to hold the nucleus together. Radioisotopes would like to be stable isotopes, so they are constantly changing and try to stabilize. In the process, they will release energy and matter from their nucleus and often transform into a new element. This process is called transmutation, which involves the change of one element into another as a result of changes within the nucleus. Transmutation can occur naturally or by artificial means. The radioactive decay and transmutation process will continue until a new element is formed that has a stable nucleus and is not radioactive. For example, carbon-14 undergoes radioactive beta decay by emitting an electron and an electron antineutrino and convert into a stable non-radioactive isotope of nitrogen, that is nitrogen 14. Here we should know about half-life of radioactive isotope. As we already discussed about radioactive decay, we know that each radioisotope decay with specific characteristic. The rate at which radioisotope decay is measured in half-life. The term half-life is defined as the time taken for one half of the atoms of radioactive material to disintegrate. Half-lives of various radioisotopes can range from few microseconds to billions of years. For example, suppose you have 10 grams of barium-139. It has half-life of 86 minutes. Means after 86 minutes, half of the atoms in the sample would have decayed into another element, that is lanthanum-139. Therefore, after one half-life, we would have 5 grams of barium-139 and 5 grams of lanthanum-139. After another 86 minutes, half of 5 grams of barium-139 would decay into lanthanum-139 and you would have 2.5 grams of barium-139 and 7.5 grams of lanthanum-139. So, this is about basic information of radioisotopes. Such information is useful while designing the parameters of biogenetic studies. Now, let's take an overall look into a tracer technique. Consider one plant synthesizes compound Z. Now, in order to determine the precursor of compound Z, that is, from which compound it forms in plant, such radioactive isotope is used. In this experiment, compound X, which is radioactive in nature, is fed to the plant. After specific interval, components of plant are isolated. Consider, after 20 days, we got radioactive compound Y, and on continuation of experiment, compound Z, which is also radioactive in nature. Then we can consider compound X is converted to compound Y and compound Y is converted to Z because all contains same radioisotope. But if we fed radioactive X to plant and we got non-radioactive Y but a radioactive Z, then it means that compound X is not converted to Y but some other compounds, then that compound to radioactive Z. Similarly, if we fed radioactive X to plant and we got radioactive Y and non-radioactive Z, it means that compound X is converted to Y, but Y is not converted to Z. So, in this way, by determining the radioactivity, the sequential synthesis of compounds in plants can be studied. This process includes following steps. First, selection of plant. It includes selection of plant on which experimentation have to be performed. Second, selection of suitable radioactive isotope. In this process, the suitable radioisotope is selected based on the study to be conducted. Mostly radioactive carbon and hydrogen are used, and to the lesser extent, for specific purpose, radioactive sulfur, phosphorus, alkali and alkaline earth metals can be used. To study the biogenesis of alkaloids, proteins and amino acids, the labeled nitrogen is always the first choice. Here, the radioisotopes which we are using should have sufficiently longer half-life. For example, among radioactive isotopes of carbon, C10 and C11 have half-life 8.8 seconds and 20 minutes respectively. It means if we use C10 and C11, the larger mass will convert to the stable nuclei, which are non-radioactive in nature. So, we cannot determine the sequential conversion of compounds due to poor radioactivity. On other hand, C14 have half-life over 5000 years, so it relatively takes very longer time to convert into non-radioactive stable nuclei. And from radioactivity, the conversion of compounds can be easily determined. Further, the radioisotopes we are using should be relatively safer. It should produce sufficient radioactivity within normal physiological state in a desired quantity. The radiation dose from the tracer should not elicit an unwanted response to the plant that can distort experimental results. The radioactive isotopes of given element should behave identically to that of natural isotopes as far as possible. Sometimes, due to differences in the mass of radioisotope as compared to the natural isotopes, the resulted isotopic effect may affect the outcomes of an experiment. For example, in case of radioactive C14 and stable C12, there is roughly 15% difference occurs, which can slightly affect the experimental result. Also, one should remember that after the radioactive decay of mother atom, the resulted daughter atom can also emit similar radiation to that of mother and will be difficult to recognize the radiation properly. For example, if both the mother and daughter atoms are beta emitters, then one might see an increase in the count rate due to inability to distinguish the beta particles from the tracer and its daughter. Third, feeding of radioisotope. The radioisotopes to be fed to the experimental plants can be produced naturally or synthesized in laboratory. Usually, laboratory synthesized radioisotopes are the choice of selection. Number of methods can be employed to introduce labeled substance into plants. Radioactive carbon, that is C14, in the form of 14CO2 can be introduced into plants by growing in the environment of radioactive carbon dioxide, that is CO2, so that various related compounds produced by photosynthesis using 14CO2 by plants will contain radioactive nuclide. This method is particularly applicable for sequential formation of opium, hemlock, and tobacco alkaloids. Root feeding is particularly suited to the plants which can be grown in hydroponic culture solution. Direct injection of precursor is sometimes possible to the plant with hollow stem, like plants of Umbelliferae family or plants bearing capsule like opium poppy. 4. Growing of plant as per experimental protocols. After feeding the plant with the isotope, it is allowed to grow in an environment as per the protocols. 5. Detection and assay of radioactive labeled components. The radioactive material within the plants can be determined by various techniques. The most common techniques are autoradiography and liquid scintillation counting. Autoradiography is used to locate the radioactive isotopes within the biological systems like whole morphological parts, example leaf, or histological section. Autoradiography associates with development of autoradiograph, that is, an image on X-ray film. In this technique, the specimen is kept in contact with suitable emulsion, and after exposure for sufficient duration, the position of radioactive material is determined from an image obtained as a negative. It can be further studied under the microscope. In the liquid scintillation technique, the radioactivity of sample material can be measured by mixing it with liquid scintillator like zinc sulfide, and resulted photon emission is measured. In this process, the sample is dissolved in solvents like toluene or xylene along with surfactants and scintillators. The radioactive particles emitted from isotopic sample transfers energy to solvent molecule and to scintillators, which emits photons and are measured. This type of technique is applicable to all types of emission, though it is most often used for beta particles. 6. Elucidation of biosynthesis. After determining the radioactive moiety in experimental plants, The sequential conversion of constituents can be determined. Generally, competitive feeding is useful to determine the normal route for the synthesis of substances different from subsidiary pathways. For example, in order to determine the synthesis of C from A via B or B dash, the inactive B and B dash are fed with labeled A to separate group of plants, and control is performed by feeding only labeled A to another group. If the incorporation of activity into C is inhibited in the plants receiving B but is unaffected in the group receiving B dash, then we may conclude that the pathway operates from A to C, probably via B. Such competitive studies have been used in 1972 by Kirkby and colleagues for the study of rates of demethylation of codeine and unnatural codeine derivatives in Papaver oriental. In this process, the biological variations in normal plants can restrict the conclusive investigation. When the compound in plant is converted from one form to another, the tracing is so easy, particularly when the fed compound is a direct precursor. But many times the fed compound is entered in general metabolic pathways and becomes randomly distributed to whole range of products. In such case, the precursor determination is difficult, and in this particular situation, the double or triple labeling experiment is performed. For example, Litte performed an experiment on Nicotiana glauca to determine which hydrogen atom of lysine molecule was involved in the formation of piperidine ring of anabasine. In this experiment, he used two doubly labeled lysine. His feeding experiment concluded that terminal N to be involved. So students, this is about how the radioactive isotopes can be used to determine the biogenesis in the plants. Today, we discuss about amino acid pathways and study of utilization of radioactive isotopes in the investigation of biogenetic studies. We will meet again with discussion of new topic. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Have a nice day.